The Royal Apothecary Society is an alchemical, though they often also include magic in their work, forsaken, society focused on creating toxins and poisons. Their most infamous creation is the New Plague, which seemed to be the primary reason why Sylvanas Windrunner created this organization in the first place. The scope of this project was initially debatable. The Banshee Queen either intended for it to be used against the Scourge and the Alliance if they stood in her way, or, according to some apothecaries more or less joking about it, the entire world. Note that this was before Sylvanas' deal with the jailer, so the more apocalyptic scenarios seem unlikely. Regardless, for the purpose of research, the Royal Apothecary Society sent its members all over the world, usually in horde outposts, but sometimes also alongside more unscrupulous elements, to gather materials for research. These range to the oddest potential ingredients. For instance, one apothecary researched a lost dark iron dwarf ale recipe, the Thunderbrew Lager, said to make the drinker stronger and more courageous, which they intended to study to see if it could fit more forsaken objectives, to quote. Eventually the New Plague was completed just before the war against the Lich King and shipped with the Hand of Vengeance to Northrend. The long sea voyage, however, weakened the strain, limiting it to only causing nausea, loss of equilibrium, and severe stomach pain. The Royal Apothecary Society, however, managed to perfect both the plague itself and its means of delivery during the Northrend campaign, with the results we all know. Later on, in spite of the Horde banning it and any research associated with it, except weaker strains, the apothecaries experimented with and created new strains and variations, including an explosive one in Cataclysm and one that almost immediately melts away living matter in Legion. Aside from the New Plague, the various apothecaries have also created various other poisons and bioweapons, as well as written studies on the Scourge Plague, though all of these are usually on an individual level rather than as a collective effort. Before the Wrathgate, the New Plague was more or less kept secret from the rest of the Horde and obviously the Alliance. While it was clearly understood that the Royal Apothecary Society specialized in alchemy, specifically poisons and toxins, the Horde generally thought that their main purpose was, paradoxically, to find a cure for the plague. The apothecaries worked to maintain this image by having the various members they sent across the world to gather research also provide assistance to the local Horde forces. Notably, Magatha Grimtotem, one of the unscrupulous elements I mentioned before, helped pitch the apothecaries to the Horde by saying their knowledge of poisons could be helpful in healing corrupted lands. Perhaps the most noteworthy examples of this are the apothecaries sent alongside the Horde expedition to Outland who, aside from conducting their own research, focused on creating a cure or prevention method for the orcs being turned into fell orcs. The exception to this rule were the apothecaries stationed in Blood Elf outposts, who typically conducted their research more freely and with far less secrecy. This probably occurred because of the invaluable assistance Forsaken forces lent to the Blood Elves in reclaiming Quel'thalas, which Sylvanas Windrunner sometimes used as blackmail material against the Blood Elf leadership. Now, rumors still existed about the existence of a New Plague, usually within fringe Horde and Alliance forces. Namely, some individual Alliance soldiers in the Arathi Highlands ambushed Forsaken couriers carrying correspondence hinting at this. Far more notably, a human infiltrator also spotted a group of Forsaken in Duskwood, but was captured by the orcs of Stonard before he could return. He intended to inform the orcs about the New Plague and the nefarious research those Forsaken were conducting in Duskwood, but a Horde adventurer hired by those apothecaries poisoned and killed him before he had the chance. While the Royal Apothecary Society and the New Plague was Sylvanas' idea, her former advisor, the Dreadlord Varimathras, also had a hand in it. His betrayal and cooperation with Grand Apothecary Putris, resulting in the Wrathgate and the battle for Undercity, is well known. However, the Dreadlord had been sowing the seeds needed for his betrayal for years. For one, while the Royal Apothecary Society was, nominally, under Sylvanas' control, The Forsaken Assassins Guild, and often the Apothecary's guards, the Deathstalkers, were created and led by Verimophorus. The Dreadlord also had some level of control, or at least influence, within the Royal Apothecary Society, sometimes, albeit rarely, even sending members on missions by his own order. Namely, the Forsaken researchers in Duskwood I mentioned previously were directly sent by Verimophorus and were under his command. More importantly, Verimophorus also informed his brother Balnazar, and presumably the rest of the Burning Legion, about the New Plague project, and Balnazar even helped Verimophorus secure vital ingredients for the plague via his agent Castellion. This happened in spite of the fact that Sylvanas seems to have taken measures to exclude Verimophorus from the New Plague project. Namely, when she was presented with the finalized strain, she did not bring or inform the Dreadlord of the event. The ranks and divisions of the Royal Apothecary Society are not really well understood outside of a few general statements. The leader of the society is Master Apothecary Faranil, only, for one, he is not the only Master Apothecary in the society, and for a time the leader of the society, apparently supplanting him depending on whether you accept a now non-canon source, was Grand Apothecary Putris. And now Master Apothecary Faranil is the leader once more, in spite of the fact that Grand Apothecary Dr. Sintar Malefius exists. In general, but with plenty of asterisks and exceptions, I suppose you could order the society's ranks as such: apprentices, assistant apothecaries, junior apothecaries, apothecaries/plaguebringers, chief apothecaries/plaguebringers, high apothecaries, master apothecaries, and grand apothecaries. The plaguebringers I mentioned are the only confirmed division within the society, again outside the non-canon sources. Namely, while the apothecaries specialize more in the theoretical and research side of the plague, the plaguebringers specialize in its delivery methods and the logistics involved. Now, these positions are still somewhat interchangeable, and plaguebringers nevertheless are required to have a solid theoretical background. As an example of these exceptions, in the latest Alliance and Horde war, Chief Plaguebringer Harris developed new bioweapons within Shadowfang Keep to unleash upon the Alliance. On the other side, the plague was prepared for delivery in Northrend by a collaborative effort of some apothecaries and plaguebringers. Among the many projects the Royal Apothecary Society dabbled in, they are also responsible for raising the skeletal horses, the undead mounts. Namely, the apothecaries used, quote, an arcane mix of alchemy and necromancy to make the horses as strong as they were in life and far more resilient. It's worth pointing out that Sylvanas Windrunner initially expected that the new plague the apothecaries were developing would also raise those it killed as new Forsaken, which didn't exactly come to fruition. This perceived failure is why, before the Cataclysm where Sylvanas got the aid of several Val'kyr, she recruited necromancers and presumably somewhat encouraged the apothecaries to dabble in necromancy, which did create some friction between her and especially some junior apothecaries.